Hello and welcome to WION World is One. I'm Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates and stories from this part of the world. Our top story this week is about a reset of relations in the region. Turkey and Saudi Arabia. For years, the two nations have been bitter enemies, but now it seems like they are mending ties. Erdogan is visiting Riyadh in what is seen as a major sign of rapprochement. So what will this change for the region? Our next report tells you.
First, there was a grand welcome. Then there was a hug, and just like that, two bitter foes come together, signaling a reset in decade-long ties. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is in Saudi Arabia. It is a two-day visit, sort of like a reconciliation tour. He had dinner with King Salman, a bilateral meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He traveled to Mecca and performed the Umrah. This is a make-or-break visit for Erdogan. If he can bury the hatchet with Saudi Arabia, it will have a knock-on effect. The Gulf will follow. Egypt could follow. It could end Turkey's isolation in West Asia. Erdogan and MBS are shaking hands and hugging. But don't be fooled. For years, these two have been bitter foes. They have clashed in the past over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, over the Muslim Brotherhood, and on who will lead the Muslim world. But now Erdogan wants to be friends, because money speaks louder than ideologies. Erdogan has a frailing economy to deal with. Inflation is soaring in the country. It was at a record 60%. The Turkish lira shed 44% of its value last year. The central bank continues to slash interest rates, and so investments from rich Gulf neighbors seems like the only way out. Exports to Saudi Arabia have plunged in recent years, especially due to the fraught ties between the countries. In 2019, their exports to Saudi Arabia were $3.2 billion. In 2021, it was just $200 million. This gradually drained the Turkish treasury, so Ankara is now working to mend those relations. For Saudi Arabia, it is a win-win situation. Turkey has dropped the Khashoggi case. It has transferred the trial to Saudi Arabia, so Riyadh gets what it always wanted. And Erdogan can now help his frailing economy by choosing political convenience over justice. Currently, West Asia is going through some serious realignment. Old foes are learning to live with each other, and personal interests are triumphing age-old rivalries. Winds of change are truly blowing here, but after the dust settles, what will it mean for West Asia? West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
From Iraq to Jerusalem, we have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across the region.
US and Israel will hold a new round of strategic talks focusing on Iran's nuclear program and countering its activity in the region. The Biden administration has recently started discussing a scenario in which the nuclear deal isn't revived. Israeli airstrikes near Damascus have killed 9 people, including 5 Syrian soldiers. This is the deadliest such raid to take place since the start of 2022. At least 6 people were killed in the Mediterranean Sea off the city of Tripoli in the country's deadliest such maritime incident in years. Lebanon's government has asked the army to investigate the incident. Iran and Saudi Arabia have held a 5th round of direct talks in Baghdad. This comes despite the ongoing political deadlock in Iraq and Riyadh's crackdown on Shiite opposition. Israel came to a standstill on April 28th, halting the morning bustle for 2 minutes as sirens blared to honor millions murdered during the Holocaust. Saudi Arabia has asked Disney to cut LGBTQ references from its latest Marvel superhero movie before it can be screened in the kingdom. Disney has so far declined the requested edits to the film.
A Turkish court has sentenced the prominent Turkish civil society activist Osman Kavala to life in prison. It finds him guilty of trying to overthrow the government with mass protests in 2013, a decision that shocked his supporters and the world. Now it comes as the Erdogan government tries to crack down on dissent and civil society. We tell you more.
His trial is a world away from the one he grew up in. Osman Kavala was born in Paris in 1957. He graduated from the University of Manchester, later taking over his father's tobacco business. The 64-year-old intellectual's fate changed in 2017. He was arrested the moment he landed in Istanbul from a trip. Kavala was charged with funding a plot to topple the government. This was the time Erdogan was battling a coup attempt. Turkey was locking up thousands of people, all of whom Erdogan linked to a US-based Muslim preacher. At that time, Kavala was heading a cultural center. He was involved in projects promoting democracy and rebuilding trust between Turkey and its arch-nemesis Armenia. But he too was swept up in the mass arrests, a move that stunned all his supporters in the country.
Court doors and prison bars closing on them cannot condemn them. Ghadi is free. Kavala is free. All our friends arrested today are free. Recep Tayyip Erdogan will be convicted before history. He will be held accountable.
They're city planners, architects, lawyers. That's all they do. We've all been there. If they are going to judge, then let them judge us all. None of us are afraid. We will not be intimidated. We promise this.
Kavala was accused of financing nationwide protests in 2013. These protests were triggered by plans to redevelop Istanbul's Gezi Park. He was also accused of being involved in a failed 2016 coup. Osman Kavala has always denied the charges. Since then, Kavala was held in Silivri prison near Istanbul. He was tried in a case that attracted growing attention, both from foreign officials and human rights groups. The US ambassador and 9 others called for his urgent release. Instead, Erdogan responded by threatening to expel the envoys. Erdogan compares the Gezi protesters to Kurdish militants. Authorities call the protests a plot organized by foreign forces. In doing so, they link them to billionaire financier George Soros. Erdogan has targeted Kavala in several of his speeches. He calls him a Soros leftover, slamming foreigners who support him.
And I think a very defiant decision, which of course doesn't come from this court, it comes from the palace. This has been a political trial from the start to finish. It's a sham trial, we call it, because there is no evidence. And it's an act of defiance against the Council of Europe. It's against, as well, not only against the defendants.
This is Erdogan's favorite excuse. Use terrorism as an excuse to crush opposition. It began after the attempted coup of 2016. More than 500,000 people faced legal proceedings. Journalists, lawyers, and opposition politicians were put behind bars, a crackdown that has destroyed Turkey's civil society. Kavala's life sentence comes especially when Turkey has bigger problems. Its economy is at its weakest. Inflation is high. It's diplomatically isolated from the West. There is public anger against Erdogan. So with elections nearing and support waning, Erdogan is doing what he does best, cracking down on those who disagree with him. But unfortunately, Turkish voters can now see through the charade. The man who set out to head an Islamic caliphate is struggling to keep his empire. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
The Al-Aqsa Mosque. It is the most contested territory in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And in question is its status quo. Now Israel says it is committed to the status quo of Al-Aqsa, but its actions indicate otherwise. And what role is big tech playing in this conflict? We tell you more.
This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, located in the old city of Jerusalem. This is a mosque that has witnessed violence before. Since decades, it has been a flashpoint, the most contested territory in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. From the Palestinian Intifada to the Gaza war, the Al-Aqsa has been at the center of it all. It's a silver-domed mosque inside the 35-acre compound. This complex is referred to as Al-Haram al-Sharif, or the Noble Sanctuary by Muslims. But the location is also considered holy in Judaism. For Jews, it is known by the name of the Temple Mount. Jews believe that the compound is where the biblical Jewish temples once stood. Currently, Jordan acts as the custodian of Al-Aqsa. So for Jordan, the recent spike of violence is a major issue. Its nearly century-old custodial obligations are in danger. Jordan is the custodian of many Muslim and Christian sites in the city. But it looks like Amman does not have much of a choice. All it can do is issue statements and condemn. Jerusalem holds a dear place in the heart of the Hashemite rulers. The Hashemite dynasty are believed to be the descendants of Prophet Muhammad. The monarchy has been the custodian of holy sites in Jerusalem since 1924. So it considers itself as one protecting these sites. For Amman, the custodianship is crucial. One, it is rooted in history, and two, it serves as a source of legitimacy. In 1967, Israel captured East Jerusalem from Jordan. Arrangements have since been governed by a status quo understanding. Israel recognized Jordan's special role in a 1994 peace treaty. They decided that the Waqf or the Islamic Trust would have control over matters inside the compound. On the other hand, Israel would control external security. Non-Muslims will be allowed into the site during visiting hours, but they would not be allowed to pray there. Israel says it is committed to the status quo, but their recent actions signal otherwise.
Israel is committed to the status quo on the Temple Mount. Muslims pray on the Temple Mount, non-Muslims only visit. There is no change, there will be no change. We have no plans to divide the Temple Mount between religions.
Jordan has both diplomatic and legal leverage, but what it does not have is leverage on the ground. The custodianship title for now is just symbolic. Others warn that the role has eroded. It needs to be updated before it becomes a problem for Jordan. A big fear for Jordan is the recent normalization drive. Amman fears that the custodianship can be transferred to Saudi Arabia in exchange of normalizing relations with Israel. The fear was so high that Riyadh had to cool things down. It reaffirmed Jordan's role as the protector of the sites. Even with this guarantee, Jordan remains fearful. As more and more clashes break out at the Al-Aqsa, questions may soon rise over its custodianship on Jerusalem's holy sites. So Jordan needs to capitalize on its status before that. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
In just few days, Lebanon goes to polls. An election that could determine the future of the nation. One that could determine the future of its aid and monetary relief from the IMF. But who would lead the country? I spoke to Jawad Adra, the founder of Information International, a man that has tracked the elections for decades. Take a look at this WION exclusive. A change in Lebanon can neither be about a certain politician or a party. It is more about the system. Is the system really a culprit here?
The system is definitely the culprit, but we have found we have located evil, and it is us. The system is us. We are all part of the system at various degrees. We all bear the responsibility. Average citizens, as well as the political parties and the political lords of Lebanon. So definitely the system is responsible, but the system is us.
So now with everything collapsing, we have an economical collapse, a security around the society is really exacerbating into worse conditions. Do you think that after this election there would be a chance to build a new system?
Historically, the system has proven to be, it is the phoenix, so it regenerates itself. And it comes out stronger. We had a civil war for 15 years, approximately, and we should have learned from the civil war that this system can only breed, collapse, and can only breed violence and bankruptcy. Still, the system regenerated itself, and now it's much stronger than it was before the civil war.
What could really break the elections in Lebanon?
The election, most probably it will happen. But of course, there is a possibility that something will happen. Security issues, it's possible. A sudden rise in the exchange rate, dollar jumps, which causes also inflation and expensive consumer goods, price of bread, price of gasoline and diesel, etc. So if this happens just a few days before the election, it is possible to have a replay of what happened in 3 years ago in with the WhatsApp scenario.
Since the independence of Lebanon, since 1943, many elections have taken place. But why is this really different after the protests, after the 17th October 2019 revolution in Lebanon? It's the first time after all that has happened in Lebanon. Why is this election, or what can this election change?
We protest, but we don't know who is Mahatma Gandhi. We protest, but we don't know who is Jawahir Lal Nehru. We protest and we don't know, for example, Neruda. We protest and we don't know our own Bustani, Yazigi, Mayizyadi, etc. We imported somehow captions and just slogans of civil society, empowerment of women, etc., of gender, whatever, these things. This is not an in-depth soul-searching of how we can improve ourselves. Now, the election is going to be the result of this. I mean, the political powers are well entrenched. There will not be, unless we have this, what we just spoke, some kind of replay of what happened in October 2019, the change will be really minimal.
It was once seen as the green fortress of Iraq, protecting it from sandstorms and desertification. But now, Karbala's green belt is a wilted failure. Plagued by corruption and lack of climate action, Iraq is grappling with climate change. Farmers are left to deal with its effects, and this could soon fuel tensions in the war-scarred nation. We tell you more.
It was once envisioned a lush green fortress, standing as a barrier against desertification and sandstorms. But now, this green belt stands as a wilted failure, left barren in Iraq's faltering climate fight. 16 years ago, this green belt was created in Iraq's Karbala. It was meant to be 76 kilometers long, a crescent-shaped strip of greenery, but now only a fraction of it remains. When the initiative first took root in 2006, eucalyptus, olive groves and date palms were planted. These were some of the thousands of the trees that would form a green protective shield around the city.
The project consists of two parts, a southern and a northern green belt. 22 kilometers of the northern green belt have been completed, but we stopped afterwards due to the lack of funds from the central government, which led to the destruction of many plants.
Now, irrigation is sparse. No one pulls out weeds anymore. Branches of the olive trees are stunted, and Iraq's symbolic date palms struggle to grow. It was meant to be a buffer against frequent dust storms, but has since done very little to reduce its impact. Earlier in April, 2 such storms blanketed Iraq in less than 1 week. The dust storms ended up in grounding flights and leaving dozens hospitalized due to respiratory problems.
We were very happy when the Green Belt project was launched, because it would have served as an effective bulwark against wind and dust. But then the project was neglected. After billions of Iraqi dinars were spent on it, the government simply dropped it.
In Iraq, the climate crisis is the next big threat. Its farmers are battling severe water shortages. Shortages are killing their animals, fields, and a way of life. The oil-rich country is one of the world's most vulnerable to climate change, struggling with a host of other environmental challenges. Iraqi wheat farmer Khamis Ahmad Abbas lost it all when his battle with drought forced him to abandon his land. Persistent droughts have pushed him into unemployment, as water shortages threaten social and economic disasters here.
I stopped working in agriculture because of the lack of rain. The increase in drought and the lack of support from the government, who could not even provide irrigation systems or water wells. I'm not the only one to have quit this profession, many other farmers did too.
As a region, West Asia is already water stressed. There was never too much water to begin with, and reports suggest there won't be much left soon. But water scarcity is already fueling tensions here. The consequences could be dire. Areas could become uninhabitable. Tensions over water sharing could rise, and political violence could erupt over water. Iraq has witnessed persistent drought over the years. Sometimes temperatures are so high it could become inhabitable soon. Add climate change to the bag, and the future of water here is as grim as ever. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Our last story today is from the heart of Jerusalem, an ancient fire ceremony. This year, Christians celebrated the Holy Fire Ceremony in a tense Jerusalem. The ceremony came against a backdrop of rising tensions with Israel, which imposed new restrictions on attendance despite backlash. Let's go to Palestine.
really surreal. I would not have imagined I would ever be here, and it's something you can't describe. You just have to be there and experience it. It's just tears, you know. It's so peaceful. You have that peace and serenity.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, coming to you from Beirut, Lebanon, and you're watching WION. World is One.